So welcome to Architects for Change, the podcast where we explore politics and culture and design and how that intersects with the built environment. Today's episode actually is going to take a slightly different turn. I'm stepping away from the more bricks and mortar of property, placemaking and the built environment, and actually going to be focusing much more on politics, which, as you know, is one of the themes of the podcast as well. So I'm really pleased to be joined by Peter York, who is a writer, a publisher, broadcaster, long-time chronicler of British culture. And you may know him as the co-author of the Sloane Ranger Handbook, and more recently, a book that I'm actually reading at the moment, A Dead Cat on Your Table, The Culture Wars and How to Win Them. And he also has his own podcast, which is called Peter York's Culture Wars House Party. And he's also the co-founder of the Specialist Research Unit. So this conversation is definitely going to be much more political, but no less relevant, I think, to the built environment, because I think politics basically shapes our places. And not only that, the culture wars that we've seen sort of start to come forward over the past few years, I think is infiltrating a lot of conversations, a lot of ideas. We have in my sector the sort of conspiracies around 15-minute cities, accusations that wokeism is killing architecture. So we will talk about the culture wars, how they're funded and manufactured, the importance of cultural capital, and whether pride of place still matters in Britain. So welcome Peter. It's a pleasure to have you in my kitchen.
It's very exciting to be in South London.
Yes.
It's miles. Miles. I come originally from British North London, and I now live in a rather peculiar part of the centre, and I barely know South London, but every so often I have an expedition.
And this is today. So maybe, Peter, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, how your sort of career took shape from Sloane Ranger and maybe to today?
I haven't really had a career. But by very good luck, I got employed. Wouldn't have employed myself at that point. A marvellous man employed me, and so I learnt a trade, an important trade, which stood me in good stead ever since, which is market research. And he was the most pretentious market researcher ever. Marvellous. Okay. He was a Harvard-educated American who'd come to London, or more specifically to Chelsea, in the swinging 60s. There are quite a lot of them, because they'd seen the films, you see. And they came to London, and he'd married an English woman, and he lived in a marvellous house on Cheyne Walk, a great big house on Cheyne Walk. So I thought, well, he's employed me, and if I follow him in all matters, become equally pretentious and so on, I will have a house in Cheyne Walk. That didn't quite work out, but nonetheless, I learnt a trade, and as I was learning that trade, I sort of had a parallel part-time thing of being a magazine writer. So I somehow, through my then girlfriend, I met this woman who was deputy editor of a magazine called Harper's and Queen, which is now Harper's. It's bizarre. It's the merger of an American shiny fashion magazine, competitor to Vogue, and a British 19th century social, quote unquote, magazine called The Queen.
Yeah.
But at the time, these two had been knocked together and were part of Hearst magazines here. It had become a special, almost experimental spot, because the two editors did what they wanted, because it was the beginning of the luxury advertising boom, and there weren't enough places to put all this lovely expensive advertising in. So you'll get pages and pages of Gucci and Harrods and so on. And within that comfortable zone, he, the editor, who was an sort of Italian Scots former advertising art director, made things look nice, and like the fashion people who very early on included Anna Wintour. And Anne, my patron, liked words people and liked ideas and was intensely interested in ideas. And she let people, particularly me, write about things so I could write about things like the New Romantics or punk or design things, which weren't really design, because there was quite a Jane Austen thing in those sorts of magazines. Because there is in Tatler, for instance, they tell middle-aged women who their daughters should marry. In Tatler is full of polo-playing tech bros, or, people who have got everything for now. Your daughter should marry this person. That's the implicit thing. Anyway, I was allowed to do exactly what I wanted, and it was marvellous. I absolutely loved it. I met a lot of very interesting people because, being the person she was, Anne Barr, with whom I wrote the Sloane Ranger Handbook, knew a lot of interesting people, and I'm eternally grateful to her for that. In turn, my proper employer knew quite a lot of interesting people, particularly design and architecture people, because he was a design and architecture nut. So at the same time as he was teaching me my trade, he was appearing on platforms and in newspapers and on the telly talking about postmodern architecture. And his particular idea, which was that modern architects were egomaniacs, doing things that ordinary people didn't need and didn't appreciate.
Okay. Right.
So when you were building, for instance, multiples of housing, you should do what the 18th century builders did, work from pattern books.
He wasn't a fan of the Starchitects.
No.
But
no.
not even for cultural buildings?
No, even though, of course, some of his great friends were kind of Starchitecty people, but nonetheless.
But I guess going back to the work that you were doing with your business partner and the writing, I suppose the two probably fed into each other, because if you're doing market research, you are researching and observing the general populace, and then when you're writing as an observer.
He liked, my first and only employer, liked working for people who were design-led businesses, paint companies or whatever, or kitchen companies. So I got a dose of doing work about how people's tastes were formed and the aesthetic of different groups, and and what is it you like about that picture? Tell me everything. And I did a lot of that, and it wasn't about personality. It was overwhelmingly about demographics.
Yeah, okay.
Age, class, region. Age, class, region, gender. Not unimportant, gender. And in the course of it, because I went and did group discussions, what Americans call focus groups, I went and did group discussions in all sorts of places that in the normal course of events somebody like me wouldn't have gone to. So I went to all the big provincial cities. They're not that big, actually, and got the feel of it and got the sound of it. So if you went to Yorkshire when I first started working, and you did something in Sheffield or Leeds or Bradford, people talked like Alan Bennett characters. People actually said the sorts of things you'll only have in a funny play. As a trained North Londoner, I found it, people say, "You've not to say that."
Yeah.
Oh, you've not to say that in front of this man from London, from up London. It was absolutely wonderful and hilarious. And I went to, say, parts of Essex, between the old working class places and the bits which were almost Suffolk. I saw that world. I saw Glasgow. Normally, someone like me would be introduced to Edinburgh first. I went to Glasgow. And it was completely fascinating, much more fascinating than Edinburgh, of course. not quite so pretty, but Newtown is lovely in Edinburgh, but everybody goes to bed at about 10:15, whereas they don't in Glasgow.
I suppose with that, the work that you were doing, you've actually got to witness different parts of the country, and I guess actually now sort of witness the sort of change that's happened over the past few years, and the sort of difference of how pride of place has changed, how people feel about where they live, whether people feel listened to. Because I think, do you feel that we've maybe become more centralist? Obviously, we've lost a lot of local newspapers, local media, local representation. And then now they're starting to get this sort of more of a north-south divide than there was before. Is that a fair assumption, do you think?
It works differently. I mean, there was a time in the 19th century when rich people in London despaired because rich people in the north with big industrial businesses were taking them over. I mean, London's finished, people would say to each other in, I guess, the 1880s. It's up there that matters. But nothing like that now, because we're talking about different kinds of businesses. Businesses that flourish in London, businesses that flourish in old university towns, like, Silicon Fen and Cambridge and all that sort of thing. Absolute change. And then you get curiosities like Sheffield. Sheffield doesn't make steel now, it makes students.
Yes.
Nurses. I mean, there's a student on in every house, on every corner, from all over the world. So that is a complete change. But for the most part, London is what matters in everything.
Yeah.
And you think, how can I not say this? And you have to say it, because if it's going to change, people have completely to be aware of it, not have false hope.
Yes.
London is what matters. London is where everything that matters is in one place. There's government, and there is the law, the crucial parts of the law.
Yeah.
There are the crucial arts institutions. There are the crucial national media institutions, including the BBC.
Yeah. So, and with that, I guess actually that kind of leads quite nicely to the book, because as we're talking about, there's been that change, and London is, as we're saying, is even more and more important. It is the centre of everything. We get branded as part of the problem as the metropolitan elite, but actually filling the sort of void as other parts of the country, and lots of people are starting to feel not listened to. The void is being filled with the culture wars, and with what you've got people like Nigel Farage and Reform. I mean, we're talking a couple of weeks after the local elections where Reform managed to pick up quite a few councils. I mean, I'm hoping, well, now they actually have to run some stuff and do some things and have some policies, and maybe they'll get exposed for exactly what they are.
I don't bet on it. Don't bet on it, because people don't actually watch performance at that level, and they've got a very, very sympathetic media audience.
Yes.
So if they do badly, there are no longer, as you said, investigative people from local newspapers to show them up.
Yeah. So it is just becoming very, very central. So this leads on to actually your book, Dead Cat on Your Table, the culture wars and how to win them.
And how not to lose them.
And how not to lose them, not how to win them.
Because you're not doing the culture wars. You're not a willing participant in them. The culture. What I'm trying to explain to people at the level of what is called Waterston's man and woman, people who have a life but want to sort of keep abreast of things, and look in Waterston's window and look at the books on the Waterston's table, but don't actually know, for reasons of having a life and geography and media.
Yes.
I love that word. For reasons of media, simply don't know that a constant culture war is being waged on them. A war of distraction. So if people are trying to distract them from absolutely everything, the things that matter in their own lives, they're trying to distract them by doing throwing a dead cat on the table. This is Boris Johnson. I owe the title to Boris Johnson. Yeah. Remember him? I always say, remember him, Boris Johnson.
Remember him.
Yes. Boris Johnson said of his political campaign director, Sir Linton Crosby, he was a very Americanized Australian.
Oh, yeah, remember him, yeah.
Yes. And he won, or helped win Boris the mayoralty, and helped him win the election in 2019. And Boris said of him, his great trick is to throw a dead cat on the table. Whereupon everyone crowds around the table and says, oh my goodness, dead cat. Or in Boris's words, troth, because he was trying to be Australian and funny.
Yeah.
And he thinks Australians talk like that. And meanwhile, while you're crowding round and talking about the dead cat and feeling emoted and disrupted and whatever.
And confused.
And confused. Meanwhile, you are forgetting about the price of everything. You're forgetting about the price of eggs. You're forgetting about the price of your mortgage. Yeah. You're forgetting about your concerns about the NHS. In other words, culture wars, as waged now, are done in a very professional and constant way to distract you by using dramatic, emotive, but ultimately irrelevant subjects.
Yes, yeah.
To get you very, very angry, usually. The idea is to get you very, very angry about something that has no real bearing on your own life. And not to think about all the things that really do matter, and not to be well informed about the things that really do matter. So a dead cat would be asylum seekers.
Yes.
Because ultimately asylum seekers are very emotive, but there aren't that many of them, as Gary Lineker pointed out. That by the standards of European countries, we take many, many fewer asylum seekers. They're not all terrorists to be.
No, yeah.
Though, if you read the Daily Mail, you might think they were all
the Daily
terrorists.
Mail that basically makes money out of feeding outrage.
It's always done it. It's not at all a new thing. It's done it for over 100 years. That Lord Northcliffe, the Lord Northcliffe of, I think I'm talking about 1913, said, I give my readers a daily hate.
Yeah.
That was his trick. Anyway, that Daily Mail. Another thing would be trans people.
Yes.
The point about trans people is there are very few of them.
Well, yes.
It's a vanishingly small number. They can't exactly take over the world. And the other thing is that trans people do not have lots of power and money. No. They can't take over the world. They're described as the trans mob or the woke trans mob or whatever, but they're not.
Yeah.
They're people who are living, at least at some point, in absolute torment about their identity and everything else. And now to suggest that all trans people want to rape your wife or your daughter at the drop of a hat is fundamentally unlikely.
Yes, very true.
You just think about what trans people are and the experiences they're likely to have had and all that stuff. It's very, very unlikely. One thing that I learned, of course, very early on from my Turbo First employer, when people are talking about a purported social trend, you have to ask two questions. One, who is doing it?
Yes.
You know, the demographics, the psychographics, all that stuff. Who is doing it? Two, how many of them are there?
Yeah.
You know, if there are two in the whole country, you can stand easy and think about other things. One thing that complicates all this, at some point, quite a lot of corporate publicists thought their brand or their company could be, helped by associating with all sorts of minority causes and
It's sort of woke washing,
Yeah, but woke
greenwashing and woke washing again.
who didn't believe in these things at all.
No,
The
it was just woke washing.
you look at the moment a bit of pressure is put on by
Yeah.
Trump, they drop the whole
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They won't give to Pride that year. They certainly won't give to Black Lives Matter or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
They drop it like that.
Yeah, and what's quite interesting about that, talking about the sort of creating fear of different demographics. I mean, if you want to talk about sort of fear of danger, as an example, to my child, the biggest danger is probably the 4x4s that are constantly driving up and down the street.
Yes.
So then on the same sort of culture wars is if you started once you bring in the sort of ULEZ or started to ban 4x4s in London, that would also be a Daily Mail. Look at these awful people! How dare they do that? Or if you're trying to do something about air pollution, which is directly affecting all of us, you're an eco zealot. So it's like
eco-zealot.
It's actually
Zealot
is the word that's used quite a lot, isn't it?
The language has changed over the decades, but the ideas are very similar. So, between the wars or even before, people were called do-gooders, and they were earnest, and they were zealots, and they were likely to moralise. Their range of causes was, of course, different, but the papers liked to make fun of them because in every case they were seen as dangerously left, and they might bring in communism one way or another. The proprietors of newspapers and their rich friends would be affected by tax.
Yes.
And stuff like that, and even expropriation of their businesses, nationalisation, all that stuff.
I suppose, and that's the thing, isn't it? You've spoken about this before. Your everyday normal person who lives in a normal place and has a normal house and a normal job does not have the sort of time and headspace to look beyond the headline.
Well,
and as to why might, you've got a chapter on Harry and Meghan actually in your book. Why might the Daily Mail hate Prince Harry so much? Maybe is it because he's actually taken them to court over something? Why are they sort of completely denigrating this other person? Who has to gain out of this news story? But your everyday person, that they're just reading the news story.
The biggest single reason for British newspapers to want to discredit Harry and Meghan is because he has been suing them.
Exactly.
And showing up their fraudulence and misdeeds.
Yeah,
That's it. I've no interest in Harry and Meghan themselves either way. I don't know them, don't have strong feelings about them. It's how they are being represented. So you will do over people who you suspect might have a softening or leftifying influence.
I mean, Gary Lineker being another one.
Gary Lineker
now
being another one.
everyone.
Gary Lineker's history being completely excellent.
I'm sure they'll target Gareth Southgate next.
Well, has he said lefty things, vaguely lefty things?
Not
He
yet.
could. I can see what you mean.
I'm sure he will be
Gary
starting
Lineker
to.
only said, I mean...
Apparently his TED Talk, I haven't listened to it yet, but apparently his TED Talk was amazing about toxic masculinity and...
Oh dear, well, look out.
Look out, Gareth
Look
Southgate.
out, yes.
But I suppose we're talking about these key characters because I think to me they are the most clearly obvious. There's a story about this person, but actually there's the sort of background, what these organisations have to gain. But you have quite a sort of interesting theme in your podcast and in the book is sort of actually talking about following the money. And also you highlight a lot of these sort of ideas. It's not just the media, it's also the think tanks, which then had a lot of influence under the last government.
What you won't know, if you're an average Waterstones man or woman, is that there is a whole vertically integrated industrial process of producing a new culture war every day. Do you know what they've done now? Do you know what this trans person has done in Tunbridge Wells? All this sort of stuff every day. And the process starts usually with somebody very rich who wants to have political influence, and often to advantage himself or his group. If you're very rich, you want lower taxes, less regulation.
You use the term him.
What? Yes.
It always is quite more likely a him.
In most cases, it is a him. And,
Yeah.
Yeah. because the ownership of billions, big, potentially politically influential billions, is mostly about guys. And so you have either an individual or a group of individuals, like the Koch brothers. Do you know about the Koch brothers?
We spoke about them when we had our nice lunch. Yeah.
Yes. Well, the Koch brothers, enormously important pair of brothers who had a great deal of money and a great deal of freedom with them, because the money was in the second largest private company in America. In other words, you're not constantly challenged and scrutinized by newspapers and shepherds in the same way as you would be if you were a quoted company. So they mounted a fight back against the evils of the 60s, all the changes that the 60s meant, not only about individuals, but about environmentalism, pollution, regulation, about pollution. They'd had a lot of run-ins with government about being polluted. They had fossil fuel interests. They and some other very, very rich people, including one of the Mellon family, did the fight back. And one of the things they did in their fight back was to create think tanks, which were advocacy think tanks.
Right.
Which had some of the gravitas of sort of academic institutions, and they call their people fellows or distinguished fellows. But it isn't. It isn't a university. It's there to fight causes. Those things are there, and they are notoriously untransparent.
Right.
So right-wing think tanks at scale are notoriously untransparent. And there's a whole group of London-based, of course, London-based, Westminster-based, right-wing think tanks, which are actually in the advocacy business. And they're well-funded, and they're usually quite discreet. And what they do is they work on politicians. They help politicians when they're speaking about their special subjects, meaning the special subject that their client billionaire is interested in.
And has paid them to do reports on.
And paid them to do reports, reports which look, at first sight, academic and independent, but they're neither of those things. They are pure advocacy, and run by very bright-eyed people of 28 and a half. And it is very, very interesting to watch, who haul in their time older, journalists, people like that. So one, they know politicians. They can help politicians frame legislation. That's really important for your billionaire who doesn't want to be regulated. Second, they know media. They know media in two senses. One, they'll be at your door or in your studio, in your TV studio or radios, in 5 minutes.
Yes, and also they're well located for that as well. And
but very well. They know all those people.
Who've got the right patter, can say the right things.
And they know that mostly they won't be challenged as to their... Every so often they are on telly. They laugh it off, but they won't be challenged. Not least, they won't be challenged by the broadcaster, who will introduce them as something like free market.
Yes, the free market think tank.
The free market.
Which does your everyday person with a normal job who lives in a normal place know what a free market think tank is.
It sounds quite nice.
But it also sounds quite liberal, it sounds quite safe, it doesn't sound dangerous in any way.
Not at all. You have no idea who these people really are and what their objectives are. Every so often, somebody lets the cat out of the bag. But
they've already thrown the dead cat on the table, so no one spots it.
But the thing they do is, if they've got a sympathetic right-wing political editor of a national newspaper, that guy will then write a story saying, what a brilliant breath of analysis and common sense comes from the institute
Yeah.
today, and it's what's called third-party endorsement. Your billionaire is saying something to his acquaintances marvelously. Over at the other end of the street, somebody else who has no apparent connection with it is saying the same thing in very smart ways.
The
Third-party endorsement.
Tupland Street.
The street could be Tufton Street. It could be Lord North Street, where the Institute for Economic Affairs, the daddy of all these things.
Because that was one of the first, wasn't it? The Institute of Economic Affairs.
It was the first of this kind of think tank, which was there for advocacy and influence.
And what's quite interesting about the name, it sounds very, very similar to the Institute of Fiscal Studies or any other.
Exactly so.
Or the OECD. To most people, we're being, there's information all the time.
That was consciously done.
Yeah.
And in 1955, when it was set up, one of the founders wrote to the other and said, we've got to be a bit cagey about what we want and what we believe in. Otherwise, people might accuse us of being partisan. And our brand, he didn't say exactly this, our brand is to be academic and independent and objective.
The Institute of Fiscal Studies.
Yes, Institute of Fiscal Studies.
That one is the independent academic organisation, not funded by a secret billionaire.
No.
But the Institute of Economic Affairs.
They never divulge their clients' names. There was a very, very funny thing that Greenpeace did, because Greenpeace got themselves up as some sort of environmental threat type company, American, who wanted to get the IEA to do a suitable study. And so you get the guy then running the IEA explaining what you did, and you give...
And they went undercover?
Yes, they went undercover and filmed undercover. It's still on the Guardian site.
Yeah.
To explain, you give us some money for some free market research. And not research, free market research.
Market.
And then, in other words, we will help you make your case anonymously.
Yeah.
And so suddenly there's also a book by somebody who was in the whole right-wing think tank game rather early called Madsen Pirie. And he sort of spilt the beans. It was a very entertaining book of about 30 years ago. He was the only person to spill the beans about how you went down Fleet Street, as it then was, and have a lovely chat with a political editor. And then he would write peace to your direction. So it's a business. It's a business of making distraction and creating influence and changing the political mood about people and institutions. One of their greatest targets, of course, is environmentalists.
Yes.
Environmentalists are very, very big.
The eco-zealots, as the Daily Mail would call them.
Yeah, eco-zealots. And to portray environmentalists, people who want to do anything to improve the environment, arrest climate change, all those things, you say explicitly or implicitly that all these people are mad zealots and rich. So, as those northern people I used to interview would say, they don't know they're born. They don't know they're born. And so mad and so rich that they had no idea about the considerations and budgets of ordinary people.
Yes. Yeah.
So
and it goes then it's from that, these are the liberal elite are going to make your life worse.
The liberal
your life
elite,
more expensive, and they don't understand you.
These prudish mob bullies, prudes and bullies, and all these things going for them. They're going to make you scrap your old banger and buy an expensive electric car this minute. They're going to make you scrap your boiler and get a whatever they
heat
call
pump,
it,
air source heat pump, yeah.
which are enormously expensive. And so they do it for the sake of it because they're mad zealots. And that works. You get that played back.
Yeah.
And people who do traffic schemes, ULEZ, that is done in order to torment ordinary people.
Yeah.
Why people should want to torment ordinary people, I don't know. but people, you get this... all these lines played back to you in research. Well, you might go down there and hear what people say because they are playing this stuff back one way or another. And of course, there is now a great network of supportive right-wing media which carry these things, which isn't free to air. People, it's carried on Facebook, it's carried on in all sorts of ways, in social media, on sites and things, which aren't very closely monitored. At least with a right-wing newspaper, you can see the article and challenge it. It won't get you anywhere, but you can see it, you can point it out, you can challenge it. You know who the author is, and you know broadly what line those papers take on practically everything. The new stuff is very much harder to manage. And very, and has faster and more insidious influence, I would say.
And I suppose it's about these organisations. I mean, let's just name a few of them. What we've got: Policy Exchange, the Taxpayers Alliance, Institute of Economic Affairs. I need to keep being careful myself not to accidentally say Institute of Fiscal Studies instead.
Yes. A lot of these, 55 Tufton Street, is deservedly famous now because it's a sort of... these are all brands addressing particular concerns of right-wing people in one building with quite a lot of shared infrastructure and quite a lot of shared strategies and campaigns. If you do your announcement on Wednesday, we'll keep ours till Thursday, so as not to compete with you, all that sort of thing.
And I suppose that's that thing about feeding into social media is you can start to bubble up the mood, the public mood and public opinion. And if something starts to go a little bit more viral, it's something that people start to talk about on social media. And then nobody even knows why are we all talking about this subject, but it's actually been fed in from somewhere else. Then it ends up on the BBC and in the newspapers.
How, as it were, issues and quotes unquote talent gets recruited. So in 55 Tufton Street, where there is a great deal of co-working between what appear to be completely separate organisations.
I suppose the legitimacy of location, like being in Westminster as one thing, also gives a sort of prestige to these organisations. If they were in Slough, they probably wouldn't have the same level of power.
The moment you see that, you know what they'll be doing.
Yeah.
They wouldn't get that nice accommodation if they didn't follow a certain kind of line.
Yeah. And then sort of, like you say, they actually are able to sort of manipulate the timings, manipulate how everything gets fed into the social media conversation. And I mean,
it's the business of creating stories.
And in the sort of politics of this, I think it is, as we're saying, they're predominantly right wing. I mean, we've had conversations in previous episodes. It's more on the sort of libertarian. Would you say they're more libertarian in their ideal?
Well, it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, look, to do this stuff, you have to have money, clever people working for you on a daily basis. These are businesses. And you have to have an enormous range of relevant contacts, which means contacts in Westminster. It doesn't mean contacts with builders' unions that could be on. This means contacts in Westminster, and particularly media contacts. You have political contacts and media contacts. And so if you are somebody without power and money, you can't get your ideas off the ground. You can't create influence. You need money to create influence.
And then maybe sort of moving on to how this actually goes back to culture, because you've been this sort of long-running, I guess, cultural commentator, observer. And I think in the early part of our conversation, we were talking about, you were describing the sort of era of the 80s and the 90s, and it was all quite a buzzy time, lots of creative ideas, lots of, the idea of, we mentioned starchitects, we mentioned fashion designers. So that sort of buzzy time of cultural identity. I think we were definitely sort of in our prime, as it were. And I don't know how you feel, but I feel like that has faded slightly. I mean, you even mentioned your colleague who moved here because he wanted to be in Chelsea and he wanted to be part of that scene. And I think we have that element of how cultural capital is actually is like soft power in a way. But with these, it feels like these organisations and this sort of the cultural that's being waged is quite against culture, design, the arts, and all these things.
Design in particular was hugely fetishized and rewarded from the 80s on. Remember, we are sort of pioneers in a certain kind of multiple retailing in this country. You know, genuinely, totally national multiple retailers who were enormous clients of designers. So you made major figures out of people like Sir Terence Conrad, who had the design and commerce and the idea that you could make a lot of money out of design. Good design meant good money. And then you had the enormous worldwide expansion of luxury brands, which meant you fetishized clothes design of all kinds. And you turned them into personal brands and you put them all together in organizations like LVMH. So design at every level was in the public mind as high class and big money and associated with luxury and the high life. Now, there's a new set of people who've taken over. Obviously, Silicon Valley, Techbro. Yes. It sounds a bigger thing to be Elon Musk than Giorgio Armani.
Yeah.
It's a bigger thing to be. And so you've got the idea of cleverness and innovation because there's design written into all these. So the idea of innovation and design itself being taken on one stage. So that guy who designed, the English guy who designed all the Apple things, what was he called? He's still around, but he's not at Apple anymore. Yeah. Anyway, people have fetishized people like him. So you have innovation, you have money, and now you have earth-moving financial and political power. Those people want to exercise political power,
Elon Musk being the prime example of that.
Elon Musk being the prime example, but to me, a more important example, because he's more consistent about it, is somebody very few people in this country know, and it's not nearly as famous as Elon Musk in America, is Peter Thiel.
Right.
Peter Thiel gave J.D. Vance his first 10 million. Peter is behind a great many things. Peter greatly encouraged Jordan Peterson to be Jordan Peterson instead of a Canadian prof. All those things.
So the new game in town is Silicon Valley, where the sort of
it's been the new game in town over the last 2 decades.
Sort of
but it's now where prestige follows money. It follows it in arrears. The money gets a bit matured, gets a bit cleverer. The money gives sponsors, the right word, sponsored things in art galleries. It takes up currently fashionable causes. It gets to be a bit cleverer. So that prestige follows in arrears, but not long in arrears. If you're worth 100 billion, people are nice to you.
Wow, yeah. And so they're feeding addiction to tech social media, phone addiction, and they're sort of
gaining
a lot of power.
Some of it's very useful.
Yeah, some can be good. I mean, we're using a phone right now to do this, to record this podcast.
Yes. There's all that. There are the devices. There are marvellous things like YouTube. Culturally marvellous.
So it can help grow culture and ideas, as well as also stifling culture and ideas.
Exactly. It can do both. It can do both very effectively. But the thing is that it can change. Political commentators are always talking about the Overton window. In other words, the idea of acceptability, the range of acceptable subjects and approaches in nice political discussion, and widening it ever rightward, and how subtle or unsubtle ways you can widen the Overton window, make certain sorts of previously forbidden subjects discussed.
I mean, if you even hear how Robert Jenrick has been speaking, his tone, the word more recently, it's very difficult to imagine that being a politician like him in his position.
Saying that stuff 10 years ago.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
He's being told, and particularly people think they know who told him, in effect, to say that, to counter reform.
Which we can understand, they are a great threat. But they, in that, actually, I suppose, going to reform and that sort of right-wing window, there does seem to be quite a disdain amongst that culture of the arts and creativity. And do we think that sort of brings the arts?
I think it's. I don't think it's 100%.
Sort of threat.
I don't think it's 100% new. It's part. The idea is that the arts are fancy affectations that people who don't know that they're born take on board to make themselves look better. That's how they would put it. They think it's an area of fraudulence and affectation.
And all part of the metropolitan elites.
And all part, exactly, the way that the metropolitan liberal elite justifies itself in the world. So, if you say to people who are the metropolitan liberal elite, who own everything, and you ask people who's got the money, people have got quite muddled ideas as to who really has the money, and who has always had the money. And you compare the sort of money you make as being a well-rewarded thesp, well-rewarded writer. Most writers aren't well-rewarded.
And even less, I think it's got worse, hasn't it?
It's got worse.
And architects, was much better in the 80s, I believe.
And architects, all that stuff.
Yeah, Mr. Foster, I think, did quite well.
Well-rewarded ones, those people do not, very, very few of those people accumulate over 100 million.
Yeah.
In the city, you're just starting when you've got 100 million.
Yeah.
And the important thing about having over 100 million, and the real players have billions, the important thing about that is that you can do more than just have a better version of the life ordinary people have. Bigger house, bigger car, yacht, etc. You can have the money to influence people, to do power plays. If you want to, you can do it under the radar. So, but to do that stuff, to be a Peter Thiel and give J.D. Vance his first 10 million, you really do need to have an awful lot of money.
A lot of this influence is being bought, probably is on the right, we feel, and it's kind of what we
overwhelmingly,
and what we think.
Overwhelmingly on the right, because it's on the right. Leave aside the right-left spread amongst billionaires. The fact is that right-wing billionaires are more tempted to do the anonymous influencing gig.
So what is actually the issue is what you called the illiberal metropolitan elite, rather than the liberal metropolitan elite.
But
You're the ones who actually have all the influence.
The liberal metropolitan elite, who don't, for the most part, have 100 million or more.
Yeah.
The most visible examples of them are performers, designers, etc.
Writers,
So
presenters,
it's very easy to
Emily
characterise.
Maitlis, they all hate Emily Maitlis.
Yes, all hate Emily Maitlis. It's much easier to characterise it in terms of those people than the people who ran investment banks, people who did extraordinary deals which netted them a billion or 2 billion in one go, etc., etc. Those people aren't well known except to billionaire spotters.
Yes.
There exists a class, obviously, of billionaire spotters.
Starting to sort of wrap up, and I think I always ask people about the future and are they optimistic, and also the current government. But I feel that we've talked about the culture wars being predominantly waged by the right. How do we counteract that? What do we need to do?
I'm not wildly hopeful, but I want people to get together and know more and think about it more.
So we need to be more informed.
Because my great revelation was my last book before this current one was about the BBC, and we got to know the ranks of the various BBC haters and how they work together. In every case, we got to know the organisation. We got to know about the think tanks, because the think tanks did ostensibly independent, ostensibly rational things, showing that the BBC was a terrible thing. And there were sites which did nothing, a site called Newswatch, which does nothing but bash the BBC. And once you got to know all these organisations, when you've written the book and you put it out there and you lived your life and you started to notice these people again, you hadn't known about them before, or you hadn't noticed them before, but you saw them doing over a variety of institutions and people, and you thought, that's what they do. And once you've learned about the whole Westminster bubble syndrome, you'd see a particular politician, and you're thinking, you would say that, wouldn't you? And you, in my case, I wanted to tell people what I now knew.
So maybe that's what we should all be doing, is almost spreading the word.
It's spreading the word. So
until we find the right billionaire.
This is how it works. This is how it works. This is how you came to think this.
Have you ever thought about setting up a counter think tank to counteract 55 Tufton Street?
Yes, no, in the sense one thinks there are other think tanks which work on different principles, which do declare their donors, and so on and so on. So you think, well, I could help people who are doing that sort of thing get their act together, get their communications together. But there is an inbuilt bias, and there's a group of academics who are very nice, the Media Reform Coalition. Nobody has heard of them, and they, at the moment, they're not quite as good as I would wish spreading their particular idea and their analyses. Their analyses show this one amazing, obvious thing, that if you look, let's take an important group, even though it's declining in importance, British national newspapers. The ownership of British national newspapers and its political direction is overwhelmingly out of sync with the spread of political views in the country as a whole. That it's about, if you take an analysis of British newspaper sales, print sales, because you have to do it that way, it's very difficult to analyse the other stuff at the moment. If you look at that, by print sales, 90% of British national newspapers are conservative and becoming more right, less. The British public as a whole, is not like that.
Generally in the centre, yeah.
The British public is, if we take, for instance, that crucial vote, the referendum, it was 48-52. That's more like it. Even if it wobbles a bit, that means a very, very key influence, even now, a very, very key influence is working overtime for the right. It means that if you are, for instance, a left-wing think tank, you are very unlikely to be written up by applicants. Your ideas are very unlikely to be sympathetically handled by a right-wing newspaper.
Yeah.
So
you don't have the exposure, and then you're less likely to be invited on Newsnight or Question Time and all
that
things.
Stuff.
So it's
they've done, Cardiff University has done studies about, because right-wing people are constantly saying that left guests, left presenters, etc., dominate the BBC. When Cardiff University looked at guests on a range of political programmes, the bias was the other way around. Nigel Farage compared to Caroline Lucas. Nigel Farage has been on Question Time, I think, 37 times.
Yeah.
And he wasn't an MP until recently. He was an MEP. He has had unwavering attention from the BBC.
He's
good telling.
Yeah. Which is, it's kind of quite worrying. But again, it's just being fed to
the
you.
The BBC, sadly, to their eternal shame, put up people from vaguely defined organisations without identifying them clearly.
Yeah.
If somebody is from the IEA, people should know what it is broadly.
Yeah.
If somebody's a Conservative MP, their sympathies are obvious, and they're very, very documented and scrutinised.
Yeah.
All these other organisations aren't documented and scrutinised.
I mean, the Taxpayers Alliance sounds quite neutral. It sounds like it represents everyone who pays tax.
It represents people who pay a lot of tax.
Yeah.
And it's people who pay a lot of
but
tax.
the general public, I pay tax.
Yes.
They represent me.
Yes. It's taken from an American archetype. Yeah. And it was invented by Matthew Elliott, who sort of owns the whole 55 Tufton Street organisation, plan. He was the architect of that whole organisation. Taxpayers Alliance, the big donors there are big rich people.
Yeah.
Lots of little medium rich people will have sent in their 30 bob. The really significant donations, they don't do breakdowns, come from the seriously rich who have something to guard.
And I think this is why this conversation is, and actually your book is vitally important, because all of these conversations, all this that's happening, that these think tanks, these policy ideas, everything, it feeds into the public conversation, it feeds into what government does, and then it feeds into what we do as architects, what all different organisations and businesses end up having to deal with or grapple with, and and the policies that we're having to work to. And it's actually quite frightening, really, because it actually makes you feel more powerless.
And sometimes even politicians themselves are fooled by this.
Yeah.
Because of the noise around a particular subject, they are persuaded that they have to respond to it.
Yeah.
They don't realise they know broadly about these mechanisms. They don't realise that there's nothing there. So
it's the noise that gets more attention than the silent majority, which is, like you say, the British public are predominantly less right-wing than the loud minority, which is the newspapers.
And have much more, if you look at British social attitudes, looking at particular social issues and concerns, people are immensely more liberal, quotes unquotes, on most of those issues than they were 30, 40 years ago. A real sea change.
So maybe to wrap up, I'm going to do a very quick fire, very quick questions. Maybe number one is, who is giving you hope? Anyone in particular? Or maybe it's you.
I sometimes give myself hope and then I relapse. But there are very, very brave people who go on battling, like Carol Cadwallader.
Yes, she is amazing.
very, very straight-talking people who go on battling, like Yasmin Albai-Brown.
Bring it to design. Your favourite building or piece of design, if you have one. Quite last.
One of my favourite buildings is, here's the thing, Selfridges. I think Selfridges is marvellous. It's an absolute cathedral of Edwardian capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
But American, Chicago.
Yes.
It's, what is it? Is it Louis Sullivan? Who is it? But a marvellous thing in every way. What else do I quite like? Of course, I like St. Paul's, and I like the fact that St. Paul's is a bit fraudulent because it's posing as a Renaissance building, but actually certain elements of the way it's constructed are actually rather medieval. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That the way it looks square cut, but in fact, it's a bit Gothic.